So I want you to just picture this for a second. You are standing on this damp, freezing wooden deck of a ship.
Right.
And you're anchored in Mahone Bay, Nova Scotia. It is the absolute dead of night.
Which is incredibly dark, by the way.
Oh, pitch black.
Hmm.
And the fog is so thick, it literally feels like wet cotton just pressed against your face. You're breathing in water. The ocean below you is black, turning slowly, almost like oil.
Just that heavy, dead silence.
Exactly. But then suddenly, there's this angry, pulsating orange glow that just bleeds right through the mist, and the silence completely shatters.
You hear the roar.
This massive roar of a raging inferno. And a schooner, completely engulfed in flames from the waterline all the way to the top of the mast, just punches through the fog.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it is sailing impossibly fast. It's cutting through the dead, calm water, directly at you, trying to ram your ship.
That is terrifying.
Right. And just before that burning bowsprit tears into your hull, the entire ghost ship erupts into this blinding, deafening fireball. The shockwave hits you. And then just nothing.
It's just black water.
Black water and the drip of condensation.
I mean, that image right there is one of the most deeply unsettling pieces of maritime folklore on the whole Atlantic coast.
It really is.
But the true horror here, the thing that really gets under your skin, isn't the supernatural element at all.
No, not at all.
The horror is that this apparition is a direct, localized echo of an entirely real, meticulously documented historical tragedy.
And that is exactly the mission of our deep dive today. We are taking the historical records, the prize court documents, naval logs, eyewitness accounts from 1813, all of it.
The primary source.
Yeah, the real stuff. And we are going to reconstruct the bloody, desperate reality behind the legend of the Teazer Light. We're investigating the final, just catastrophic days of the Teazer privateer ships during the War of 1812.
Because to really understand this ghost story, we have to dissect the absolute nightmare that birthed it.
Right.
This whole narrative, it's basically a masterclass in human hubris, right? It's about the claustrophobic dread of being hunted in this incredibly hostile environment.
Hunted at sea.
Exactly. And the catastrophic madness that takes hold when violent men are backed into a corner with absolutely no conceivable exit.
So we really have to step back into an era where the ocean was, frankly, not a regulated highway.
No, not even close.
In 1813, the North Atlantic was a cold, unforgiving graveyard. I mean, the margin for error was non-existent. Survival depended on this razor's edge of weather, nautical skill, and honestly, the psychological stability of the men manning the guns.
Which wasn't always a guarantee.
Right. And if you look at the sheer volume of ships lost in 1813 alone, I mean, vessels like the Euphrates, the Peacock, Captain Gallatin, Chesapeake.
General Pike, Hamilton.
Yeah, the Scourge, San Domingo, La Hogue, Canso, Phantom, just endless. It paints this picture of an environment that was essentially acting as a mechanized meat grinder for wooden ships.
That's a great way to put it.
And this wasn't just, a few unlucky storms. The geopolitical reality of the War of 1812, combined with the limitations of 19th century maritime tech, it just created this perfect storm of casualties.
Yeah, and those technological limitations, we really cannot overstate them. I mean, a ship in 1813, you are navigating without reliable chronometers for longitude.
So you barely know where you are east to west.
Exactly. You have no weather forecasting. None. And there is absolutely no means of distress communication. If you're in trouble, nobody knows.
No radios, no SOS.
You are at the absolute mercy of sudden barometric pressure drops and these violent gales.
Just terrifying.
And then, you add in the aggressive naval blockades set up by the British Royal Navy. You have hundreds of ships that are forced to sail in these horrific winter conditions, literally hugging dangerous coastlines just to avoid the warships.
Which usually results in them getting smashed against uncharted shoals anyway.
Right. And the North Atlantic in winter, it is lethal. The water temperature alone is going to kill a man in minutes.
So into this endless landscape of sinking and slaughter, right, this small American schooner out of New York enters the fray.
The original Teazer.
The Teazer. Owned by a merchant named Samuel Adams. And it's important to note the Teazer wasn't a military vessel in the traditional sense.
Right, it was a privateer.
Right. And we often just casually equate privateers with pirates, but the mechanics were entirely different, weren't they?
Completely different. A privateer carried what was called a letter of marque.
Right, a legal document.
Yeah, it was a state-sanctioned weaponization of private commerce. Basically, the United States government didn't have a massive navy to fight the British. So they essentially outsourced the war to venture capitalists.
Which is wild to think about.
Yeah.
Like privatized naval warfare.
Exactly. The economics of this letter of marque were highly regulated, but they were profoundly lucrative.
Huge money to be made.
Massive! So a wealthy investor like Samuel Adams, he'd purchase a ship, outfit it with cannons, hire a crew, and he had to post a really massive financial bond with the government.
Just to ensure the ship only attacked enemy vessels, right?
Yeah.
No actual piracy.
Right. And when this privateer captured a British merchant ship, they didn't just loot it and sink it like a pirate would.
Right. They wanted the ship intact.
Yeah, so they'd put a skeleton crew, a prize crew, onto the captured vessel and literally sail it back to an American port.
And then what? Like a court would sort it out.
Exactly. An admiralty court would officially condemn the captured ship as a valid prize. They'd sell the ship and all its cargo at auction, and those profits were split.
Between the owner, the government, and the crew.
Yep, it's state-sanctioned economic warfare.
So the goal isn't this glorious broadside naval combat. It's literally to financially bleed the enemy by severing their supply lines.
Bit in the wallet.
Exactly. And the Teazer was built specifically for this kind of predation. I mean, it was a schooner. And from a nautical engineering standpoint, a schooner has this distinct, very lethal advantage over the typical merchant brigs of the era.
Oh, absolutely. It comes down to the rigging.
Right, because merchant ships were primarily square-rigged, meaning their sails hung perpendicular to the length of the ship.
Like big square bed sheets catching the wind.
Yeah, built for carrying massive amounts of cargo on the trade winds. But they could really only sail effectively if the wind was pushing them from behind. If the wind was coming toward them, they were practically paralyzed.
They're lumbering beasts.
Right. But schooners, they use fore and aft rigging. The sails run parallel to the keel.
Which changes everything.
It does. Because it utilizes the Bernoulli principle. It's the exact same aerodynamic physics that give airplane wings their lift.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah. The wind flows over the curved surface of the sail, and it creates this pocket of low pressure that literally pulls the ship forward.
So it's sucking the ship into the wind.
Exactly. It allows the schooner to sail incredibly close to the wind, tacking back and forth at these really sharp angles.
So in a chase scenario.
In a chase, the square-rigged merchant ship is basically a lumbering herbivore. It's completely at the mercy of whatever direction the wind is blowing. But the schooner is the apex predator.
They can just outmaneuver them completely.
Outmaneuver, outtack, run literal circles around its prey. And the records show that Teazer was lethally efficient at exploiting this.
I mean, the numbers are staggering. On its very first voyage in August 1812, it captured 12 vessels.
12, 1-1 trip.
Yeah, 6 brigs and 6 schooners, including these heavy cargo ships like the Peter Waldo, the Venus, and the Osborne.
That is just, that requires a staggering amount of logistical coordination. But put yourself on the Teazer for a second. Think about the psychological toll on that crew.
Oh, the stress must have been immense.
Right, because capturing 12 ships means you're constantly sending your own men away. You have to put a prize crew on every ship you take to sail it back to New York.
So your own crew on the Teazer is steadily shrinking.
Exactly. You are accumulating massive, life-changing wealth. But the tension on board must have been unbearable. Every ship you capture, every cannon you fire, every distress signal you force an enemy to raise, it acts as a dinner bell for the Royal Navy.
Yeah, you're making a lot of noise in a very dangerous neighborhood.
The Teazer is basically a serial killer of the sea at this point. A small, silent predator slipping in and out of the fog, pulling victims down one by one. But if you're the crew, how terrifying is that realization? You know the British are hunting you.
And that paranoia would be a physical weight on the ship.
Aye.
The crew of the Teazer knew that the Royal Navy was actively looking for them.
You can't hide forever.
No, because a privateer's entire survival strategy relies on stealth, speed, and isolation. Strike the weak stragglers, vanish before the authorities arrive.
Right.
But when you are as successful as the Teazer, you generate intelligence. British merchant captains who escape, they report your position. The Royal Navy starts adjusting their patrol grids.
They're closing the net.
Exactly. The Teazer's crew would have been operating in this state of hypervigilance, knowing that the horizon could at any moment produce the towering mass of a British man of war.
And in the brutal arithmetic of the ocean, every small predator eventually meets a bigger monster.
It's inevitable.
Which brings us to January 17th, 1813, dead of winter. The water off the eastern seaboard is freezing. The rigging is heavy with ice, and the Teazer's luck abruptly runs out.
They finally get caught.
They do. And they are cornered not by some slow merchant ship, but by the colossal HMS San Domingo.
Oh, man. A 74-gun ship of the line.
Yeah, a British behemoth. The Teazer is outgunned by a factor of 10. There's no brilliant nautical maneuver to escape this, so they surrender.
They had no choice.
But the British don't take the Teazer as a prize. They don't sail it back. They evacuate the American crew onto the San Domingo, and then the British intentionally set the Teazer on fire.
Just burn it right there.
Right there, burning it to the waterline in the freezing Atlantic.
And you have to understand, destroying the captured vessel, that was a calculated tactical decision by the British commander.
Why not keep it, though? It's a fast ship.
Because placing a prize crew on the Teazer to sail it to a British port would have weakened the San Domingo's own fighting strength. And in the harsh conditions of January 1813, it simply wasn't worth the risk of losing those men.
Okay, strategically, that makes sense. But think about the psychological impact of this on the American crew.
It's profound.
To a sailor in that era, the ship isn't just a vehicle. It is a living, breathing entity.
It's their entire universe.
Yes, it is their fortress, their home, and it's literally the only physical barrier separating them from the suffocating crush of the dark ocean. So you're standing on the deck of your captor's warship, you're shivering in the winter wind, and you have to watch your own vessel incinerated.
It's a total emasculating violation.
It really is. But the aftermath of this capture, it introduces a mechanism of 19th century warfare that fundamentally sets the stage for the horror that's coming. Because the British don't throw the Teazer's officers into a dungeon.
No, they don't.
They release them. They allow them to go home to New York on what's called parole. And we hear that word, right, and we frame it as this gentleman's agreement, this polite nod to aristocratic honor. But the reality of naval logistics paints a much darker picture.
Right. The British utilized the parole system because the alternative was catastrophic for them logistically.
How so? Like, why not just keep them locked up?
Because maintaining prisoners of war on a wooden sailing ship is a nightmare. Every prisoner is consuming finite rations and fresh water.
Oh, right. They have to feed them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Furthermore, the British prison hulks, these were decommissioned, rotting warships anchored in harbors that they used as floating dungeons. They were notoriously overcrowded, diseased, and lethal.
Just floating death camps, essentially.
Basically, yeah. The mortality rate from typhus and dysentery was staggering. So to alleviate this burden, the British instituted the parole system.
Okay, so how did it actually work?
Captured officers were permitted to return to their home country, but only after signing a legally binding, incredibly solemn oath.
Like a mafia blood oath, almost.
Very much so. They swore upon their honor and their lives not to take up arms, sail, or engage in any hostility against Great Britain until they were formally exchanged for an equivalent British prisoner held by the Americans.
So imagine the suffocating weight of that promise. Your physical freedom is granted, sure, but your life, your honor, your neck is now tied to a ledger in a British Admiralty office.
Right, it's a bureaucratic collar.
If you break that parole and are captured again, you lose all the protections afforded to a prisoner of war. You are classified as a spy, an outlaw, and a traitor to your own honor.
And the standard universally applied punishment for breaking parole was death by hanging.
Right. No trial, no prison hulk, just the gallows.
Yeah.
So the weight of that signature meant you were effectively neutralized as a combatant until the bureaucracy processed your exchange.
Which, I mean, that could take years.
And this is where we really must focus on the psychology of the Teazer's first lieutenant, Frederick Johnson.
Yeah, this is the guy.
Because the historical records describe Johnson explicitly as a man possessing a, quote, violent temper.
Right. And a man with an aggressive, domineering disposition does not internalize forced submission well. Johnson had just been stripped of his command. He watched his ship burn to the waterline. And then he was forced to sign this humiliating oath to his enemies just to secure his own survival.
Just sitting in New York, sidelined from the war.
Exactly. Watching other privateers ring in these massive fortunes while he is legally paralyzed by a piece of paper, it would have been a corrosive, maddening experience for him.
His rage and humiliation are just festering. And simultaneously, Samuel Adams, the wealthy merchant who owned the incinerated Teazer, he's not passively accepting his financial loss either.
Oh, not at all.
Adams immediately begins pouring his capital into a replacement. But he doesn't just buy another ship. He commissions a purpose-built Predator, a schooner that is longer, sharper, and carries a vastly larger sail area than its predecessor.
Built for pure speed.
And he christens it the Young Teazer, The name itself is this blatant act of defiance. It's a message to the Royal Navy that, hey, your efforts only spawned a faster, more lethal descendant.
Yeah, the Young Teazer was designed to be a glass cannon. Its entire architecture prioritized speed and maneuverability over defensive strength.
So it wasn't meant to take a hit.
Not at all. It was meant to dictate the terms of the engagement. Strike rapidly and vanish before a response could even be mobilized.
And it is onto the deck of this newly forged weapon that Frederick Johnson makes the fatal decision that dooms absolutely everyone involved.
He breaks his parole.
He does. Driven by vengeance, maybe greed, or maybe just an inability to exist outside the violent paradigm of the war, Johnson breaks his sacred oath. He signs on to the Young Teazer as its first lieutenant, knowing perfectly well that he has not been formally exchanged.
It's an act of pure audacity and terror.
It's like jumping into a getaway car driven by a man with absolutely nothing to lose. By walking up that gangplank, Johnson transforms from a paroled officer into a dead man walking.
He's carrying a secret that acts like a lit fuse.
Yes. Because if the ship is captured, the regular crew, they'll be treated as prisoners of war. But Johnson, the British officers are going to cross-reference the ship's logs with their parole registries. They will see his name, realize he violated the oath, and they will spring him up from the yardarm without a trial.
His very presence aboard the ship turns the vessel into a ticking time bomb.
So I want you to imagine being a regular crew member on that ship. You think you're just a privateer making money. You have absolutely no idea that your first lieutenant, this guy with a notoriously violent temper, has secretly doomed you all because he physically cannot afford to be captured alive.
Right. And consider how that terror warps the entire chain of command.
How does that underlying dread infect the daily life on the ship?
Well, a ship operates on strict hierarchy and discipline, right? The crew takes their emotional and tactical cues directly from their officers. When the first lieutenant is operating under the constant suffocating dread of the gallows, it infects every single decision.
Every order he gives is laced with that panic.
Exactly. For a standard privateer captain, spotting a British warship on the horizon initiates a calm calculus. You check the wind, you calculate distance, you map your escape vectors.
It's just a math problem.
Right. But for Johnson, spotting a sail triggers an existential panic. His orders would be frantic, aggressive. He'd be pushing the ship and the men to the absolute breaking point.
Just whipping them into a frenzy because his literal life is on the line.
The atmosphere on the Young Teazer would have been incredibly thick with this unspoken oppressive tension. Every time a sail is spotted, Johnson's paranoia spikes.
But, speed and maneuverability can keep you alive in open water. But those advantages evaporate the second you run out of ocean.
You can only run so fast for so long.
Exactly. You can only outrun the enemy until the geography itself turns against you. The Young Teazer went on this highly successful tear, terrorizing the coastal trade of Nova Scotia, snapping up prizes, completely infuriating the colonial authorities.
But you can only humiliate a superpower for so long before they mobilize a disproportionate response.
And the British had had enough. The Royal Navy dispatches a hunting party specifically tasked with eradicating this schooner. And this brings us to June 1813. The vast open ocean suddenly shrinks, and the geography becomes a legal dead end.
They find themselves cornered deep within Mahone Bay, Nova Scotia.
Which is not a great place to be trapped.
No, Mahone Bay is an incredibly complex nautical environment. It is this jagged coastline choked with hundreds of small islands, hidden shoals, and these very unpredictable tidal currents.
It's a maze.
It's a total maze. If you do not possess intimate local knowledge of the depth soundings, navigating it under pressure is practically suicidal. And the Young Teazer, running hard from its pursuers, makes a critical navigational miscalculation.
They push you far in.
They push way too far into the bay, cutting off their own angles of escape.
So the chase reconstructs as this agonizing slow-motion trap. The Young Teazer is blocked, not by a single ship, but by 3 colossal British men of war.
The HMS Log, a 74-gun behemoth, the HMS Hogue, and the HMS Sherwood.
To understand the psychological terror of this moment, we really have to look at the sheer scale difference. Just picture it. A sleek, desperate American schooner trapped against the coast, while the colossal silhouettes of 3 heavily armed British warships slowly block the only exit.
Yeah, a 74-gun ship of the line is a floating fortress.
It's basically a castle on the water.
Truly. It features multiple enclosed gun decks, walls of oak that are 2 feet thick, and a crew of over 600 disciplined sailors and Marines. Their masts tower over 150 feet into the air.
And the Young Teazer, in stark contrast, is this slow-riding schooner, Single gun deck, exposed to the elements, built of relatively thin timber because it's designed for speed, not absorbing cannon fire.
It's a sports car up against 3 tanks.
Exactly. So they're
Yeah.
trapped in the bay, and then the wind suddenly dies.
The worst possible thing that could happen.
The water turns into a dead calm, and a schooner without wind is just a helpless arrangement of wood and canvas. So explain the sheer panic of this nautical checkmate. Because there's no wind to save them, no fog thick enough to hide them, you are staring down the barrels of dozens of cannons.
Right, and the British warships, they don't even need to risk navigating the dangerous shoals to reach them. They simply drop anchor, lower their massive longboats, and begin loading them with heavily armed boarding parties.
You're just going to row over and take it.
They're going to row right across the glassy water and take the Teazer by force.
So what is the psychological state of a crew that suddenly realizes they're entirely out of options? The longboats are dropping into the water. The rhythmic splash of the oars is getting louder and louder.
It must have been a blend of profound despair and grim calculation. For the vast majority of the crew, the situation is incredibly clear. The voyage is over.
They're done.
Yeah, they will surrender. They'll endure the horrific conditions of a British prison hulk at Halifax or Dartmoor, but they will eventually see the end of the war. They want to throw down their cutlasses, raise a white flag, and live.
Right. But that rational calculus of survival only applies to men who actually have a future. We have to return to Frederick Johnson.
The first lieutenant.
Standing on the deck, listening to the oars of the approaching British Marines, Johnson knows his reality. The moment those Marines board, secure the ship, and ask for the officers' names, his life ends.
There's no prison hulk waiting for him.
There is only a short drop and a sudden stop at the end of a hemp rope. The crew is staring out at the British longboats, absolutely terrified of the monsters approaching from the water, completely unaware that the actual monster isn't outside the ship at all.
He's standing right next to them on the deck.
Realizing he has completely run out of time.
And when a man is faced with unavoidable, humiliating doom, the veneer of rational thought just evaporates. He is left with nothing but raw, destructive instinct.
And for a man historically documented as having a violent temper, that instinct is catastrophic.
It really is.
So it's June 27, 1813. The British are closing in. The surrender is imminent. The crew is preparing to be boarded. And then someone, and the historical consensus, points squarely at hand line. First Lieutenant Frederick Johnson makes a decision of unfathomable cruelty.
He vows to avoid capture.
He leaves the main deck. He heads down into the ship's galley, retrieves a glowing red-hot coal from the stove, and walks deliberately toward the ship's powder magazine.
And to fully grasp the horror of what happens next, we have to deeply analyze the architecture and the function of an 1813 powder magazine.
Because it's not just a closet with some barrels in it.
No, not at all. The magazine is the most heavily fortified, rigorously regulated, and honestly terrifying room on a wooden warship. It is the vessel's vulnerable nerve center, usually located deep in the ship's hold, right below the waterline.
To protect it from enemy cannon fire, right?
Exactly. It is a densely packed storage vault, and the walls and floor are lined with solid copper sheeting.
Wait, why copper?
Not for structural strength. It's to prevent any iron nails from accidentally striking a spark. Copper doesn't spark when struck.
Oh, wow, that makes sense.
Yeah. The regulations surrounding the magazine were obsessive. When the gunners' mates needed to retrieve powder during a battle, they had to pass through a specialized anteroom. They wore felt slippers so the leather soles of their boots wouldn't create friction sparks.
That is incredibly tense.
Lanterns were never brought inside. Ever. The room was illuminated by a light room, a completely separate sealed compartment shining light through double-paned, thick glass windows.
So you're treating this room like an active bomb.
Because it is. The room was literally designed to hold the destructive potential of the entire warship in one concentrated, intensely volatile space. Hundreds of pounds of raw black powder stored in wooden barrels and canvas cartridges.
So to drop a hot coal into it is not an act of combat. It is an act of deliberate, instantaneous mass murder-suicide.
Oh, without question. Black powder is a precise chemical mixture of saltpeter, charcoal, and sulfur. It's what we call a low explosive.
Meaning what, exactly?
Meaning it doesn't detonate with a supersonic shockwave like modern high explosives do. Rather, it deflagrates. It burns incredibly fast, releasing a massive volume of rapidly expanding hot gases.
Right.
If you ignite a small amount in the open, it just produces a bright flash and some smoke. But if you ignite hundreds of pounds of it inside a confined, thickly constructed wooden hull,
the ship becomes a bomb.
a catastrophic pressure cooker bomb.
So just pause and make yourself feel the visceral terror of those final seconds. Picture Johnson. He takes this glowing coal from the stove. He walks down the dark, creaking stairs into the hold. He bypasses all the safety protocols. He opens the heavy door to the copper-lined magazine, and he's standing amidst barrels of black powder.
It's unthinkable.
It's like being trapped in a locked room while someone calmly pulls the pin on a grenade. In the seconds between that coal leaving his hand and the powder igniting, what goes through the minds of the crew who might have seen him? The pure betrayal, the realization that their own officer has sentenced them to fire.
By dropping that coal, he is sentencing dozens of his own men, men who trusted him, men who were literally preparing to surrender and live to be vaporized. It's born of pure, selfish terror.
And the physics of the event are apocalyptic, aren't they?
They are. The moment the coal touches the powder, the chemical reaction is instantaneous. The rapidly expanding gases immediately seek an exit. The oak beams and the thick planking of the Young Teazer, they resist the pressure for maybe a microscopic fraction of a second before the structural integrity completely fails.
So it doesn't just burn.
No, the ship does not just break apart, it violently ruptures. The oak timbers splinter into thousands of high-velocity shrapnel needles.
And a massive cataclysm obliterates the vessel. The concussive roar of the explosion is so massive it physically damages the eardrums of the British sailors in the longboats, who are hundreds of yards away.
A huge pillar of fire and smoke erupts into the night sky, illuminating the entire bay.
The intense heat instantly vaporizes the men closest to the blast, and those on the upper decks are violently thrown into the freezing black water, just surrounded by falling, burning debris.
Almost the entire crew is slaughtered in a fraction of a second.
Right. And the profound tragedy here is that this wasn't an act of nature. It wasn't a lucky cannon shot by the enemy. It was a massacre driven by one man's violent temper and fear of the gallows.
The irony is profound and deeply disturbing. In his absolute desperation to avoid a dishonorable death by hanging, Johnson orchestrated one of the most horrific, violent spectacles imaginable.
Destroying his own ship.
Destroying the very vessel that represented his defiance and massacring the crew that facilitated his final days.
So what happened right after? The British just watched this happen.
The surviving British warships were stunned by the sheer violence of the suicide. They logged the destruction, collected the few severely burned survivors from the water, and eventually they just sailed away. The war moved on.
The sea eventually swallowed the shattered timber and the bodies. And you would think the story ends there, right? Just resting in the silt at the bottom of the bay.
You'd think so.
But violence of that magnitude leaves a scar on the world. The smoke cleared in 1813. But according to the locals of Mahone Bay, the fire never actually went out.
Right. This is where the deep dive shifts from historical fact into the realm of supernatural horror.
If you speak to the generations of fishermen, sailors, and residents of Mahone Bay, they will tell you that the historical documentation of the explosion feeds directly into the enduring folklore of the Teazer Light, or the fire ship as some call it.
And the phenomenon of the Teazer Light is remarkably specific, which really distinguishes it from your vague, run-of-the-mill ghost stories.
How so? Like, what are the conditions?
Folklore dictates that the apparition is tied to precise environmental and temporal triggers. It is said to appear on the exact anniversary of the cataclysm, late June.
Okay.
It manifests almost exclusively on heavily foggy nights, and particularly within a 3-day window of a full moon. Yeah, these specific conditions suggest a phenomenon that is deeply ingrained in the local environmental cycles.
And the sightings described by witnesses over the last 2 centuries, they are terrifyingly visceral.
Oh, they're intense.
People do not report a faint, sad mist floating on the water. They report a fully rigged schooner, entirely wreathed in roaring flames and choking black smoke.
The sensory details are what get me. Witnesses claim to hear the actual roar of the fire and the crack of burning timber.
But the most unsettling detail is the behavior of the phantom ship itself. It doesn't just float there, it is aggressive.
Right.
It actively approaches other vessels in the day, moving at impossible speeds, intending to ram them. Witnesses describe an overwhelming, paralyzing sense of fear as it approaches, and right up until the moment it reaches the point of impact, it erupts into a massive ball of fire and then just vanishes without a trace.
From a psychological and, anthropological perspective, this legend really acts as a form of localized collective trauma processing.
Regional PTSD.
Exactly, because in 1813, the communities surrounding Mahone Bay bore witness to a localized apocalypse. They saw the night sky turn into daylight. They felt the concussive shockwave rattle the foundations of their homes.
And the smell.
The smell. They smelled the horrifying scent of sulfur, burning oak, and incinerated flesh drifting over the water for days.
God. So when a community witnesses a localized apocalypse like that, a flash of light, a roar that shakes the coast, how does that trauma mutate over generations?
That's the question. When a community experiences an event of such sudden, inexplicable violence, the memory mutates. The Teazer Light becomes a mechanism to explain the lingering sense of horror attached to that specific body of water.
Right, so you have to ask, is the Teazer Light the literal ghost of the ship? Or is it the ghost of the terror that people felt on the shoreline that night?
That's a fascinating way to look at it.
Look at the specific behavior of the Phantom, the aggressive ramming speed. I view that as a direct narrative reflection of Frederick Johnson's unresolved fury and malice.
Yeah, he died angry, cornered, and deeply violent.
The legend ensures his spirit is trapped in the exact moment of his violent climax, eternally lashing out at a world that forced him into a corner.
And the narrative of the Young Teazer really compels us to confront the darkest capabilities of human nature. This specific ship became a classic example of a maritime ghost story because of the recurring themes.
Hubris, broken oaths, unnatural destruction.
Exactly. A ship sinking in a violent gale, that's an expected tragedy of the era. We're used to that. But a ship intentionally obliterated by its own officer just to spite his captors, that is an atrocity.
It is.
And the legend of the Teazer Light serves as a permanent, fiery monument to the consequences of that atrocity.
So imagine standing on the rugged shores of Mahone Bay today. The water is freezing, it's choked with heavy fog. The full moon is just a blurred smear in the mist.
And you're looking out at the water.
Right. You see a faint, pulsating orange glow out there. Your rational mind scrambles for an explanation. You think, oh, it's a reflection of the moonlight, or a strange atmospheric refraction, or maybe a distant lighthouse beam catching the fog.
But then you remember the history.
You remember the hot coal, the meticulous copper lining of the magazine, the barrels of black powder, and the violent temper of a desperate man. And you realize that maybe it isn't a trick of the light at all. Maybe it is something much older, rushing through the dark to find you.
It is just a stark reminder of the sheer scale of the ocean and how incredibly vulnerable human beings become when they're stripped of their moral anchors in an isolated, hostile environment.
Yeah.
The ocean is vast enough to hide almost anything, but occasionally it refuses to keep its secrets.
We often take comfort in the idea that shipwrecks quietly sink to the bottom of the sea. We imagine them resting peacefully in the pitch black, slowly becoming encrusted with coral, buried and eventually forgotten by the world above.
Out of sight, out of mind.
But the story of the Young Teazer forces us to ask a profoundly unsettling question. If an act of human desperation is violent enough, if the betrayal of a crew is cruel enough, and if the terror experienced in those final seconds is deep enough, does the ocean actually refuse to swallow it? Does the sea reject the memory of that trauma, forcing it back up to the surface to burn again and again? The next time you look out at a dark, foggy coastline, ask yourself, what else is down there, refusing to stay submerged?
A chilling thought to leave on. We map the oceans, but we can never fully map the darkness they conceal.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the abyss of the Teazer. We wish you safe travels, calm waters, and clear horizons. Until next time.